All right, welcome everyone. Welcome back to the LH Accelerator Demo Week 2020. We are super excited to have you with us for this last day of discussion on innovation in the construction industry. My name is Jules Besneinu. I'm a director at Cleantech Group, and I will be your moderator for the day. For those of you who haven't been involved with the LH Accelerator yet, this demo week really represents the end of the support journey for the 12 companies that were selected as part of season 2. It's a really important week in which they will be able to showcase their innovation as well as all the work that they put in during the acceleration. It's also obviously a key moment for the innovation communities at Sika, LH, and CCCC. And so before going any further, I'd like to introduce Sandra Boivin, who leads the LH Accelerator Initiative and will tell you a few words about the program and this last day of the demo week. Welcome, Sandra.
Thank you, Jill, and hi to everyone. So welcome to this final demo day. It marks the end of the second season of the LH Accelerator program. So for those not familiar with the program, it has been launched by LafargeHolcim in partnership with Sika and CCCC to create new business opportunities with the best innovative startups in our sector. In a nutshell, this program is quite unique for several reasons. First of all, the presence of 3 international corporate companies. This is a key asset for the startups to address diverse business opportunities across the construction value chain. Then the commitment of countries in our operations, from the very identification of challenges to the execution of the acceleration plans. You will see later on in the innovator sessions that our country operational teams have worked hand in hand with the startups. You see here the countries involved from the start, but additional ones joined later on. Finally, the experts mobilization from our R&D centers and the access to lab and prototyping facilities is a key differentiator in our program, and it has been valued by many startups. Next slide, please. So 12 startups were selected for season 2 from over 300 applications. They come from Israel, Canada, Germany, France, the Netherlands, Denmark, Sweden, and they have skills and solutions in the field of material science, AI, robotics, sensors, decarbonization, or circular economy. Next slide, please. So we kickstart season 2 last year during the sprint days. We still had the possibility to meet in person at that time, and the event was quite intense. Since then, the second season had to adjust to the COVID-19 situation and to remain flexible despite country lockdowns and travel bans to carry out the 12 acceleration plans you see mentioned in this slide. Thank you all for your flexibility, your creativity, and your resilience in these difficult times. So next slide, please. A few words about the demo week. So we organized the presentation and the program outcome with the associated discussions around 3 focus areas. So yesterday we covered, on Tuesday already, we covered the future of concrete. Yesterday, the session tackled the new opportunities brought by IoT, robotics, and AI. And today is the final demo day associated to the topic of decarbonization and circular economy. For those who were not able to join the first 2 sessions, we will put all video recordings on the Whova platform just after the event. So Julia will tell you more about this in a few minutes. So next slide, please. Without further delay, let me introduce the topic of the day: decarbonization and circular economy towards a sustainable future for construction. The call for application we opened for this challenge was twofold. On the construction waste part, we were looking for solutions to rethink the design and process of making and delivery of cement and concrete to avoid, minimize, reuse the waste from quarries to building sites, propose alternative ways to tackle natural resources scarcity. On the CO2 neutrality part, we were looking for solutions to measure, track, and develop solutions to move towards CO2 neutrality. As you know, LafargeHolcim recently joined the Net Zero Pledge with science-based targets, and it is without saying that this topic is essential for us. I will let you discover the agenda of the day, but before that, I would like to warmly thank our experts panelists of today, Aisha El-Kamlishi from ADEME and Eric Trusevich from Breakthrough Energy Venture. They have kindly accepted to set the scene today with inspirational insights, and I wish you a very pleasant event. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra, for this introduction. So here's how the next 2 hours are going to unfold. We'll start with a roundtable with our 2 experts, as Sandra said, Aisha and Eric. We'll then hear short presentations from 4 of the companies that were accelerated on this topic of decarbonization and circular economy. And after a short Q&A session, we will then move to innovator demos that'll happen in separate breakout rooms. If you've been with us for the last 3 days, you know how this is going to go, but you will have the ability to choose between 2 of the 4 and spend 30 minutes with each, understanding their innovation and the work they completed during the acceleration, as well as extensive time for Q&A and for meeting each other. So we chose to host this virtual event in an interactive setting and on an interactive platform where you can find each other, message each other, and really use this time to connect. And we'll try to be as interactive as possible on this Zoom line here. So we encourage you to be as active as possible in front of your screen, even more than you would be at an in-person event. And so to start this session on an interactive footing, I'd like to welcome Alban Jourda, who is one of the coordinators of the LH Accelerator and has a first question for you.
Hey, thanks, Jules, and welcome everyone to the LH Accelerator Demo Week. I'm going to spend my time in this session encouraging you to become active in the chat as well as listening to our great speakers. To start off, I'd like to find out where you all are on the learning curve of this particular subject, decarbonization and circular economy. So a minimum, give me a number of 1, 2, 3, or 4 to represent your answer to this question, showing on the slides what share of global greenhouse gas emission did the construction sector responsible for in 2019. So we have 4 options, 3%, 6%, 11%, and 18%. So feel free to elaborate and add some color. And as part of introducing yourself to the other, and live with us in right now. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Alban. And so as we let people respond to this question on the chat, I already see a lot of answers, I'd like to ask René Bachely, who is in charge of the accelerator for Sika, to offer some context on this topic. René, are you with us? And if so, can you tell us why decarbonization is such an important topic for Sika?
Thank you, Jules. Yes, for Sika, climate change is a global megatrend, and as a construction material supplier, we can play a vital role in making positive changes. In fact, it's our duty as a good corporate citizen to ensure we do everything we can to minimize our impact in the environment, and in turn support to our customers in minimizing their impact too. That's an important target and vision for Sika. Thank you.
All right, thanks, René. So Alban, can you tell us how the question went? And
it seems part of the audience has a good answer, since the answer is number 3, it's 11%, and 11% is represented the manufacturing building materials and products such as steel, cement, and glass in the part of emissions. Some people also highlight the last reply, 18%. So as you know, the debate is still open on this picture, but we have a good trend on the third one. So it confirms the good level of knowledge of it.
Right. Well, to dive deeper and even much deeper into this topic, we're thrilled to welcome 2 exceptional speakers, Aisha El-Kamlishi from ADEME and Eric Trusevich from Breakthrough Energy Ventures. We thank them for joining us today and for sharing their insights. For our first conversation, I'm thrilled to welcome Aisha El-Kamlishi. So as I mentioned, she is an expert in CO2 capture, storage, and recovery for the French Environment Agency, ADEME. Welcome, Aisha. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, welcome, everyone.
There you are. All right. Could you please start by just introducing yourself and maybe tell us a few words about your role at ADEME?
Okay, yes, thank you. So I'm a doctor engineer in chemistry, and I'm in charge of the CCUS program at ADEME. ADEME, it is the French Agency of Energy Transition. So we are under the Ministry of Energy Transition. And like what I say, I'm in charge of the project on this topic of CCS and CCU.
Jules, you're on mute.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry.
Thanks,
I was
Aisha,
thinking it was my.
So to dive right into this topic of mineralization and CCUS, could you maybe share with us a couple of real life examples or projects that you financed that fit in that category?
Yes, of course. So like what I say, I'm in charge of, so at the beginning, when I began at ADEME, I was working on the CCS program, and we had several projects on what we called ex situ mineralization. So the main goal was to immobilize CO2 by doing rock. So we had one project finished now, it's Valorco. The project was led by ArcelorMittal, and the main goal was how to reduce CO2 emission from blast furnace by using CO2 and rocks. So it was literally that. So they were using olivine, one minerals, to extract metals and then to carbonate. To carbonate with CO2 to get magnesium or calcium carbonate. Unfortunately, this project was stopped because no profitability was possible to find with this use of mineralization with the only game or the only objective of to store CO2. So after that, they decided to work on how to use CO2 and, for example, the steel slag to get new product for material building. And so now we are more looking on this kind of R&D project. And currently we have one project. The name is Carboval. It is led by the University of Toulouse. And in this time, so it's always the same, how to capture CO2 and to immobilize CO2. But this time is to produce new product for building material by using the slag from the nickel exploitation in New Caledonia. And the main goal of this project, and I think for me the main innovation, is they are trying to work at territory scale. So they want to develop or to even to have a production of building material at the scale of New Caledonia. So this work is very exciting because we are hoping to have a very good benefits from environmental point of view, working at this scale for mineralization, and also from a technico-economic point of view, because New Caledonia, they don't have any resources, so they need to import this building material. If we are able to produce on site, we can reduce this importation of new building. So we have this project ongoing, and hopefully the result will be very positive. So I'm quite excited by this one.
It does sound super exciting. Well, I think you touched on a key question there, which is just the economics of these types of projects. We'll ask that question to Eric as well later, but maybe to start with you, does it need to be, so would such a project work in larger markets, for instance, where there's no such shortage of building materials?
It's an excellent question. Like what I say for the previous project, we demonstrated that if there is no market for this kind of product, so the carbonate, it will be very difficult to find the profitability. So there is a need to find a market, but like what you say, there is already product, and it's very difficult to compete with the current product. So what we are aiming to do is to work on new building materials with new technical performance that could be very, very suitable and to find a market. So to have benefits from CO2 emission reduction point of view, I think we need to address a very large market. But if we want to have competitive product, unfortunately, it's a very the niche market that could benefit to this project.
And maybe just in terms of cost, is the cost mostly located on the kind of capture side, or where are most of the costs in these projects?
I think they are on both sides, because for the CO2 capture, we had some project where they tried to inject directly the flue gas. So instead to capture CO2 and to work with the pure CO2, they are using directly the flue gas, and it's working. So in France, there is a project FastCarb, and LafargeHolcim is involved on it, where they want to carbonate building waste with using the flue gas. But it is, I think, the main hurdle is about the logistic. You need to have a very high amount of this waste or mineral, and so you have to find. If you want to transport this waste to the point where there is CO2, or if you need to transport CO2 to the point where there is this waste. So it is the big question, and we have this different project to solve on it. But I think it's not only the CO2, the main hurdle, it's also the logistic and to find this mineral waste.
Got it. And so if you project out to kind of 5 or 10 years, when do you think those types of projects will be kind of viable commercially and will be able to kind of spread out and be deployed more generally?
I think in 5 or 10 years, we can be optimistic and say, because there is not only economics hurdles, there is also technical and regulatory hurdles. So we can say maybe in 5 or 10 years, we will have improvement from the technologies, and so this product could go on the market. And for example, what we are seeing now, it's this product can substitute the cement, so the production of the cement. And so when you are doing your concrete, you can reduce the amount or the share of the cement, and so you can reduce the CO2 emission. So I think what it is very interesting with this new product is that you can reduce the share of the production of the cement production, and we all know that it is this part who is emitting the most. So if we are able to reuse waste mineral or even building minerals to produce a new building materials, it will be a real circular economy. And for me, it could find a market, because with a very strong incentive or even with a high carbon tax, this product, because they are low carbon, they can find a market where the customers are looking for a very low carbon building material. So I think with a very strong regulation or incentive, this product can be deployed at large scale.
Got it. And indeed, the project in Caledonia seems very promising in that way, kind of creating a kind of local economy and circular one. We have a question from the chat from Mirdash that asks if there is a relationship between the CO2 reduction and the quality of cement. Do you have a comment to that?
So I think it is one question that the research project wants to reply. It's if we are using directly flue gases, because there is not only CO2 in the flue gas, you have also impurities. If we could have an impact of these impurities on the quality of the cement and on the quality of the the technical performance that we are looking for. So it's why we are looking to that. But if you are using pure CO2, so there is some research lab, and there is no impact on the quality of the cement. The question is more about if you are using flue gas, what could be the impact to have these impurities in your product at the end?
Got it. Yeah, that's super clear. Maybe one last question is you touched on the point of regulation. I'm curious to hear from you. What type of regulation would make a big change in this sector? Is it just higher carbon tax or?
So I was not thinking only to the regulatory point on the carbon tax, but I think yes, we need to have a high carbon tax for the to have more projects with the aim of reduction of CO2 emission. I was also thinking about the regulation from the building side, where they don't want to use a new product because you have to demonstrate that the technical performance will be the same. And what I understand, it's all the standards, current standards, are using Portland cement, so it is more on the composition. So there is some limitation on the use of this new kind of product. So there is a need from the building community to work together to develop new standard for this new product. So yes, there is a tax part, but there is also this regulatory aspect on the building material.
Right, and standards. Yeah, that's super clear. Right. Well, thanks a lot, Aisha. I'll come back to you for a final question. But before I do so,
thank you.
Thank you for being with us. Before I do so, I'd like to introduce Eric Trujevitz, our second speaker. Eric is an entrepreneur in residence at Breakthrough Energy Ventures, and we are thrilled to have him with us. Welcome, Eric.
Thanks very much.
Could you, same as Aisha, just take a minute to introduce yourself and maybe Breakthrough Energy Ventures for anyone who may not be familiar?
Yeah, sure. My name is Eric Trujevitz. I'm an entrepreneur in residence at Breakthrough Energy Ventures, and I'm entirely focused on cement and concrete decarbonization for the fund. I get involved, a lot in other adjacent areas, carbon capture or fuels, industrial fuels decarbonization. But my real goal with the fund is to try to make the fund successful in investing in the sector of cement and concrete decarbonization. And Breakthrough Energy is a venture capital fund. Based in the US, but with a global mandate. It's a stage agnostic venture capital fund, so it can do anything from a couple $100,000 to tens of millions. It invests out of a current fund of $1.1 billion. It was created about 3 years ago by Bill Gates, and it only has individual non-financial institution LPs. So there's 23 individual LPs. And its real goal is to find technologies that are growth-oriented, scalable, and can bring reductions of at least 0.5 gigaton, so 500 million tons of CO2 emissions annually by 2050. So that's a little bit about me and about the fund. I would say one other thing to highlight about the fund, it's very different, I think, than other venture capital funds because it invests very creatively. It can invest in existing startups, but it can also create new companies in areas where the fund's corporate partners or whoever we're collaborating with sees a real need or has a technology that they want to roll out into a new company. So that's a little bit about the fund, the mandate, and my background.
And maybe to get a little bit more granular, could you give us a sense of why Breakthrough Energy Ventures has identified construction as one of its interest areas?
Sure. Well, I think that's really simple. So manufacturing is the largest area of CO2 emissions in the world. So it's around 1/3 of the entire global emissions comes from the manufacturing sector. And then from that manufacturing sector emissions, more than half is from cement and concrete. And the vast majority of the materials that are used, especially cement and concrete, are used into construction. So, it's a real no-brainer for us that we need to look at that. I would say there is also, a real focus on that in the fund because the fund looks, how can we be additional? It has a huge amount of internal technical expertise, and it looks for things that are hard to decarbonize. So the cement industry, for instance, is hard to decarbonize because more than half of the emissions are from the chemical reaction of limestone when you produce cement, or steel is very difficult to decarbonize because of the intimate relationship of met coke and met coal with the purification process in steel. So we look at those things and say, okay, this is huge area of CO2 emissions, very difficult technical challenges. That's exactly where the fund would like to be involved.
Got it. And so if you look at this industry as a whole right now, what are some of the areas where you think there's a great potential to abate emissions with innovation?
Okay, yeah, I mean, I focus mostly on cement and concrete decarbonization. So I would say four of the areas that I think are the most interesting, because when I look at the sector, I kind of have a, you know, a framework in my mind, which is industrial feasibility on one side. So what about the feedstocks? Are the feedstocks scalable, or is the product, the use of the product going to be changed? The nature of the material going to be changed too much? That's kind of the industrial feasibility vector. And then the economic feasibility vector is the combination of what's the capital cost investment per ton of production, and what's the variable cost impact of that thing. So when I look at that framework, I spent about half a year looking into all the different technologies, and four really jumped out at me. You know, one I think is probably many of the people on this call already are very familiar with them, but I think new generation SCMs are an absolute must for the industry. So as fly ash and slag are kind of exiting the market due to their own, you know, the growth of the cement market and the own dynamics of those markets with the, you know, the shutdown of coal-fired power plants, et cetera. I think there needs to be an enormous search for how to create economically viable, scalable, and consistent quality new generation SCMs. I think that's one. Another one that I really like, and I think needs innovation and focus and is getting it increasingly, is the use of fillers, inert filler materials that are particle size optimized, and solving the rheology concerns, or solving all the concerns around using more particle optimized fillers to replace cementitious products. I think that's really interesting. There's a lot of research, a decade of research on that, which I think is just going to come to market, and we need to support that. I think digital process and quality optimization are really interesting. So the fact that cement plants are often, you know, controlled. I don't know about LafargeHolcim, but many cement companies are controlled by, you know, a handbook and some, you know, someone who is trained by, you know, the person who was there before, and not by a real automated ML platform. You know, I think it's a real area of opportunity. And I think the same for the ready mix plant, actually even more. If you can control the quality and control the industrial process at both the cement and ready mix plant, I think you can vastly reduce it. And then the last one I think is pretty obvious, but it's, you know, what's the lowest cost carbon capture and utilization technique, you know, lowest parasitic energy load for the capture, you know, best product, you know, from the last presentation we were talking about, what is the best use of mineralization to create synthetic aggregates or precast or what have you. So those are my four favorite areas, and I spent a lot of time on those. But I would say, you know, there's, in addition to technical innovation on those areas, it's really important to take into account the non-technical areas that need innovation. And I think one of those is just the pure measurement of CO2 emissions of these materials. How do you get high quality audited EPDs so you don't have, you know, a poor quality EPD precast beating out a much lower CO2 with a high quality EPD? You know, how do you set targets per square meter for built environment, you know, of carbon intensity that really makes sense and incentivize the right things and not, you know, not the wrong things? How do you flexibilize the regulatory and the standards environment? And how do you innovate financially to get first of a kind pilots financed and, you know, have lower cost green financing for large scale investments that cement companies need to make? So those are all the areas that I think about.
Great. And maybe to come back on Aisha's point, so she was raising the question of economics in a lot of CCUS cases. Do you think it's something that we'll get to solve in the next few years?
Yes, I would absolutely. It depends what you mean by few. So the few is a you know, I think it absolutely has to be solved. I think it will be solved. I think there's no way that 2.8 billion tons of CO2 are going to come out of the cement sector and someone's not going to figure out how to mineralize part of that, and, you know, how to have a circular economy based on the construction demolition waste or other industrial waste, you know, how to produce precast, how to produce synthetic aggregates, you know. And I also think, you know, a lot of this both voluntary and mandatory regulatory environment around CO2 pricing is going to have a huge impact within very few years. I think it's actually, a lot of companies are seeing that. I'm sure LafargeHolcim sees that immediately, you know, as a in certain geographies, but that's going to be predominant worldwide, I think. And I think there's going to be value. I don't think that the world is going to continue to allow waste to be dumped for free. So if solid and liquid waste cost money to dispose of, you know, a gaseous waste, I don't think 50 billion tons of gaseous waste are going to go into the atmosphere without pricing in very many relevant geographies.
We sure hope so. Maybe one last question to you, and then I'll ask the same to Aisha. We're going to hear from four really extraordinary companies in this field, startup companies that have been accelerated by LH. Could you tell us what you think the role for these startup companies are in the construction ecosystem and in trying to tackle some of these barriers?
Yeah. I mean, I think when you think about startups, I think the primary recommendation I have is to focus on what is actually economically viable, industrially feasible, and is needed in the sector. So, I think a lot of startups will have a creative idea looking for a problem, or will have, something that can be done at 5 times the cost of the normal industrial process that they're trying to investigate. But I think the real people have to understand cement and concrete are commodities markets, and they will not, even being 10% more expensive is difficult and almost impossible to get into the market. So I think I always encourage startups to look for the real economic case and the real scalability of their process before choosing which route they want to go. I think that's the fundamental thing that I would like to see startups engage with. And I think the best way to do that is with industrial partnerships such as this, where they really can get a detailed understanding from the corporate players and industrial players of where are those areas, what are the needs, and what is actual the forecasted economics of their process. So.
Aisha, any reactions to that? What do you think startups' role is in decarbonizing construction?
Yes, I totally agree with what Eric says. We need to have this innovation coming from the startup, because what we are seeing now, we can do some improvement or some optimization, but we have this very large scale of CO2 emission with the production of cement, and so we need to have breakthrough technologies to find a new way to produce cement and concrete. And like what I say during my talk, we need to find a new uses of this new material building. So, and the startup, I think, is the best place, because they are not afraid to take risk and